sort of the history of our farm, Oaknoll Farm, is that our dad bought this in 1937. There was an auction. He'd already been living back in Blacksburg, having joined the faculty at Virginia Tech and doing field work out around the state. But they brought him back to Blacksburg, and they were living in an apartment in Blacksburg when this particular property came up for sale. They separated the property into two pieces and auctioned each of those pieces off, and then, as is often done, then put it all together and to say which way would bring the most money. And so that the bidding on the full property got up to $10,000, and that bid was made by Mr. Pasco, who was a next door neighbor for many, many years. And then my dad sort of looked at his father, who was a farmer and a good judge of property, and said, you know, sort of nodded to him. So
he was still smiling, I think is what he said. He was still smiling.
And so he bid $10,025, and that bought about 140 acres here that they've had since now. It's been in the family for 77 years. So it's a very nice piece of property that you know, we all grew up on. There was a small house, four room house. Only had running water, outhouse to use, and they were living there, and that's the house I came to after I was born in Roanoke. And so that we continued to live in that house for approximately 4 years. And I think, maybe 5, yes.
I think we can say our mother was sort of a city girl. I mean, she'd grown up in Cornwall, Ontario, and then in a small town. So this was a big adjustment for her. In her life, she'd never lived in a little house that didn't have an indoor toy. But again, they were really committed to buying this farm and making it work and building their own place. So I know Pop always bragged on her that even in that little house she would entertain department deans and other faculty, and you know, they were very committed and joined in this project of buying this property and making it our family place.
But of course it was 2 miles out of downtown Blacksburg, you know, and I think our mother's, you know, bridge partners and others kind of looked down, you know, poor Josephine Obenshain out there in the sticks, you know, on little Price's Fork Road, which was, say, a 2-lane narrow country road at the time. And we grew up riding the school bus to town and driving our cattle up and down Price's Fork Road to another farm down on the other side of Price's Fork. But this was the start of the farm operation. It was basically I guess a cow-calf operation, white-faced Herefords, and also then a Jersey dairy herd. And my brother was very active in FFA when he was in high school, and we had a small milking operation with milk. Yeah,
we all set it up.
Machines and
the other is that the road it was on, I mean, the Price's Fork Road was, as Joe said, a winding road. There was also a row of big oak trees right on the front of it, and so that was really what led my mother to name it Oaknoll, one word, Oaknoll, the name that has continued to this day, obviously. Yes. Also a huge, beautiful oak tree right in the front yard that when they widened the road, all of that came down. And as Joe said, it was 2 miles out of town, and for us to you know, get to town, go to the movies, we'd either ride our bike or walk in and out of town. I mean, it was a nice walk to town at that time. And since, as everybody knows, the town is, you know, moved out way past us, so that where now the high school, elementary school, middle school, all basically are now in town, as well as the church. So there's a lot more traffic on the highway. So people hardly believe that we would drive cattle all the way down Price's Fork Road to the 5 miles to the other farm or to the Price place on the mountain. So.
And you were telling about the house too. So.
Well, the house, Papa really was the general contractor and luckily had bought all the pipes and other things that were needed for the house before December 7th, 1941. After that, nothing would have been available for anybody, and so that allowed the house to continue, and we moved into the house that Betty and Fred live in now. He hired a Mr. Rader from down in Body Tot, who came up and basically built the whole house, although Mr. Rader would get upset with him or every once in a while go back to Body Tot, and Pop would have to drive down and beg him, convince him, or whatever it took to get him to come back and finish the work that he had started. But he obviously did an incredible job of putting that whole house together.
Work. I mean, again, there's not a crack in the plaster anywhere in the house, and say he did, and he was very careful. I would say, he laid the brick. I mean, he maybe had some help, maybe with the electrical or other, but he basically, framed the house and put the brick, and Papa said he was very careful. I mean, he'd be up on the scaffold and he didn't like the brick, so he'd get down and rummage around and just to get just the right color and piece for it, and he just did a masterful job.
Apparently he did. He may have gotten help with the electrical, but the one thing I knew or remembered was that he didn't do the plastering. He had someone else to come in and do that. But the house, the reason there's no crack in the plaster is because of the way he put the house together.
Exactly.
And I think it's just been a wonderful family home. It was a really happy place to grow up, on the farm but in the house. Our mother was such a loving, supportive presence, and here again she was a city girl, and luckily her 6 sisters said, "Joe, don't ever learn to milk a cow."
That's right.
So we would be the outside, but she never complained about us running in and out of the house with mud or cow manure on her. It was just a great, wonderful place to grow up.
Actually Papa's 6 sisters who told her never to learn to milk a cow.
That's right, Papa's 6 sisters, right.
But she helped manage the farm because, again, our father, because of his work with the extension and soil survey, I mean, he was gone a good deal, traveling all around the state of Virginia and sometimes, out of state at conferences and other things. So Mama really helped keep the farm going. We had, several hired men who were very dependable and, helped with the work. And, I mean, at times, we raised corn and sometimes wheat, and as well as hay. And in fact, when we were young, I mean, they were still using horses. I mean, we have some pictures of us being on the Nell and Days. I mean, and using wagons, horse-drawn wagons, to bring the hay into the barn. And
plowing.
And plowing as well.
I plowed behind horses. We didn't get our first tractor until I was probably 9, and that was 1947. So and even then, I mean, you only had one tractor, and you still had a team of horses or teams of horses to get the work done. So it was a operating farm, and raised corn, wheat, plenty of pasture, and that was sort of the way it went.
And then I guess in the 50s, Papa bought a second farm down below Price's Fork, and gradually added to that over the years. So we would farm this farm and sometimes move the cattle down there, or move to a sort of mountain pasture we used in the summer there on Price Mountain.
Right, but
so,
we raised hay in both places. I mean, there's no question. Certainly remember all the work there, running across a few snakes every once in a while, and kept it interesting, to say the least.
Cappies? Let me see if I can get her to move. Sweetie Pie, why don't you move so we can get him? There we go. You can see behind us here and around, you know, the farm is 140 acres. It extends from this wonderful oak forest all around, really pretty much in the viewshed. Everything that you can see is part of this farm, and Papa was a soil scientist, so he knew what he was buying. He knew this had excellent soils on it, and also water supply. We have, you know, you can see where the trees are growing are creeks, and there's a pond at the bottom here, so it was really ideal for a small family farm at the time. And so as the development as Blacksburg has really exploded. I mean, it was what, about 8,000 when we grew up here?
If that many.
Oh,
if that many, maybe
35 to 5,000.
When we grew here.
Yeah.
And now the entering class at Virginia Tech is going to be bigger than the whole town was when we grew up here. And so again, the town has sort of leaped beyond us, and to preserve really the core of the farm, we are selling the 30 acres to the east of us, which is already bordered by a hotel and a gas station and across from a medical center. And that is going to allow us to preserve the rest of the farm, we hope, for another at least generation, because this has been a wonderful farm in that not only we grew up here, but this is where we have family gatherings. We've had cousins camp here several times with up to 40 Obenshains gathered around the table and in the yard on our final dinner. So this has really been sort of the heartstone for the family, that we come back and we gather here with all its memories for each of us.
Well, speaking of development, I mean, when I grew up, across the street was just forest, and so we would play there and go in there, and that was a great place to be. Then the development started, and Oak Manor and other things came across the street. Certainly it's changed the character of our environment from where it was when we grew up, but it's I think that keeping the majority of the farm as a working farm is really a goal for all of the family.
Yeah, and I'm proud to say we're actually one of the members of the Planning Commission, chairman of the Planning Commission, talked about us as really sort of an island, and we're very proud of that all the other farmland around us has pretty much been sold. Luckily, Virginia Tech owns a farm right next to us on the west, but we are proud to say we have this beautiful island of farmland still here in now the midst of town.
Yeah, and we haven't tried to be, say, an isolated. We've also helped the town, by granting them an easement for the Huckleberry Trail, that goes along the far side of the farm and then joins onto the Virginia Tech property. So we've certainly not been living in isolation from
right.
the community.
And really had no plan for doing any development, but then got unsolicited offer to because of the growth of tech, the need for additional student housing. So, I mean, that is what led to, the sale of the property on the easternmost part of the farm.
So we're doing this so that our grandchildren and the future generations will have an idea of what the farm was like at this point, and say it is something we're very proud of, and it was a beautiful place to grow up, and we all worked here. I remember, minding the cattle. They'd be in here. I'd have to keep them out of the alfalfa or some part of the field that I guess we were getting ready to make hay. Or we all worked. We raised chickens. We were just talking this morning. Both Scott and I raised chickens, and we had hogs and pigs and various times, as well as our beef cattle and Jersey cattle.
And I guess also what it meant to us as a family growing up, and Scott mentioned, I mean, it was hard work, and especially since, my father sometimes preferred to do it the old-fashioned way. They still cut corn with machetes when I was growing up. But what it meant to us as a family, because my father, loved farming, and so nights, and we all had milking chores we'd do before we went to school and after school. But also on the weekends, there was always a project. We were rounding up the cows to vaccinate them, or building fence, or digging thistles. There was always something that we did together.
So we never got into a lot of trouble as kids.
Right.
I guess
We
that's
never had a
fair to
chance.
say.
But it was also a great bonding. And of course, my mother, she would process the milk when we brought it in. We drank our own milk and had a garden. So it was really
well, our grandfather, my mother's father, lived with us up until the early 50s, I guess, and he was a great gardener, and so Mama would can
and once we got the other farm, we'd go down and be picking blackberries and be making blackberry jam and everything.
Our older brother hated picking blackberries. That was if he were here, he would say that's the thing he least liked to do. I think.
But the Thompson Place farm was interesting in that Papa bought to start off like a 200-acre farm. And then as farms around him would come available, he would buy those up, and I think one reason he was able to get them is that he had a reputation of being a fair man and an honest man, and if you went to him and he would give you a fair price for your property. And then of course one of his longtime friends also owned a fairly inherited family farm next to it that Papa was able to buy. So gradually we grew that farm until it was a 500-acre farm. And I used to, when I was working with the land trust, and I would be talking to groups of landowners and trying to, again, prove to them that I wasn't just a Blacksburg city girl, that I actually grew up on a farm, I'd mention the fact that, you know, at the church, we had always had the oldest car in the church parking lot because Papa would save his money to buy more land or a good bull or a few more cows, something like that. He didn't waste his money on buying a new car every year. So, so that turned out to be a wonderful thing for us.
Yeah, no question. The other thing about the property there, he would trade property because people would want a little bit more here on the road, and so there were a lot of ways that he acquired, you know, the different property, but was more than willing to work with people who needed, you know, some kind of change or additional space. But it wasn't that he was giving it away, and he was always careful, just as we spoke about the people who are trying to put in a cable here, thinking that there's a 50-foot right-of-way from the middle of the road. My father knew exactly what the right-of-way was, and they had about 8 inches on the other side of the sidewalk, because he was very precise in making sure that anything that was taken off the farm property that was needed to widen the road and so forth, he knew exactly what the easements were, and that was has been very important. And,
well, and the other important decision he made like that is a lot of people sold off, you know, a little, and we had people all the time, you know, whether individuals or churches or wanting to buy just a little lot on just you know, you got 140 acres, just give us this little piece there. But he was wise enough to hold on to the whole property, because that's what makes it, one, so beautiful and so special. I mean, people love this view shed. We used to joke if people would just pay us a nickel for every time they drive by and say, oh my gosh, I just love this view, you know, we'd be wealthy. But he saved, he never cut off, he saved the whole farm intact. The beautiful view shed.
Yeah, I always said he had $1 million view, and that's about right.
That's true.
That's right.
And this farm meant much more to him than money in the bank.
Right.
You know, it was a great love of his life.
And
along
of ours,
with his family.
and so that's the issue. Why we're all back and enjoying the place and enjoying being here together.